Hello and welcome everybody. We're going to be talking about cryptography today. Mike, I think we're going to have a little bit of a disagreement here. You mentioned cryptography is something that people should learn early. I think it's something they should learn later. Where do we go from here? We're on two different sides of the coin.
All right, well, let's do this. I mean, one of the things that's a big challenge for me, especially, let's go with like the ultimate security certification, which to me is the CompTIA Security Plus. The reason I call it the ultimate certification, Richard, isn't because I think it's the best certification or the one's going to make you the most money. What I think it does is that it can take a light blue collar, what I call a screwdriver tech, somebody who actually works on systems and works on networks, and can get them started with an understanding of what the world of IT security means. I mean, IT security alone, just IT security, has over 1,500 different certifications now. And it's easy to see people get lost in it. So the reason I push Security Plus is, number one, the main thing, I believe in. I think CompTIA did a good job with it. The challenge with Security Plus is that if all IT security knowledge is a big round table, imagine a 12-foot diameter round table, white, okay, nothing on the table. Grab some pepper and just get a big pinch of pepper and like throw it out on the table. And wherever that lands, that's Security Plus. Security Plus should have been called Survey of IT Security, because all it basically does is at the end of it, you're like, holy smoke, there's a lot to learn out there.
Sure.
You know? People come into Security Plus not even understanding things like governance versus audit versus pen test, red team, blue team. Most people don't know these terms, and they come out the other side understanding that.
Well, and that's why I think that cryptography is not something that somebody just starting out learning Security Plus should have to try to understand. I think it's pretty tough. Well, I mean, I know that may sound a bit ridiculous, but I really think that's kind of tough for a lot of them to wrap their heads around when they don't know a lot of basic stuff that they need to learn to understand cryptography. I mean, first off, we should probably start off with what is cryptography, right?
Sure.
So describe how would you define cryptography?
To me, cryptography is the art of taking understandable data and transforming it in such a way that it looks like noise. It's random noise. And the ability to not only do that, but then to convert it back into understandable data. To me, that's the cornerstone of what cryptography is.
Okay.
The reason so the reason I like to bring cryptography early on in any introduction to IT security, my Security Plus book definitely does this. The reason I do it, Richard, is, well, first of all, I did it your way for a long time. That's how everybody did it. And what started to hit me, and this was about 10 years ago, I started to find myself, like in Security Plus, we talk about 802.11 encryption, right? Which is a part, it's one of the objectives. So we start talking about, everybody talks about WEP, good God, it's been dead now for 15 years. But it's no longer on Security Plus, thank goodness, but WPA is still on there. So what really is the difference between WPA versus WPA2 and heaven forbid WPA3? Well, a big part of that is going to be RC4 versus AES encryption, to take a streaming encryption and replace it with a block level encryption like AES. Now, it's hard for me, I got a bunch of answers here, Richard. It's hard for me to talk about something like that without understanding the basics. My rule of IT instruction has always been the same. Never use a term unless you can define it immediately. That's rule number one. So if there's anything behind that term that needs more definition, then go back further. The other thing is the reason I like cryptography early on is because it gives people an understanding of what the heck are we really doing. And so many times people get lost. I would bet you, Richard, that there are less than 5,000 people on Earth who could really understand true PKI and certificates in such a way that why do we use them every time we go to eBay or Amazon or whatever it might be. And the aha, the eureka moments I get And I actually do a little bit of certificates pretty early on too, mainly because I want people to get a understanding of why do they exist. It's a great way to go from digital signatures. I digress. Let me stick with what I'm trying to say. Most people don't understand that even the connection between you and eBay is symmetric. It is. Well, it doesn't have to be. I mean, there's some Diffie-Hellman stuff you can do in there too. But I mean, in general, when you're looking at a cipher suite coming in from a web server, it's usually going to be some kind of, you know, your authentication. There we go. To get your authentication lined up. But then once you set up all this RSA gobbledygook, the only thing that happens is you get past an AES key 99 times out of 100. That's it.
Okay, Mike. There's two things that you've said that are bothering me. Number one, you said that obviously if you don't understand the concept, you shouldn't even use the word, right? So
Yes.
When you start talking about cryptography right from the very beginning, if you don't have the basis, if you don't have the foundational knowledge to understand even what the heck cryptography is, in other words, you've been spitting out AES and Diffie-Hellman and a bunch of other terms and terminology that's utilized to explain cryptology so people understand what's going on.
No, that's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying don't say the word AES until they know what symmetric cryptography is. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
And if you put cryptography at the end of a Security Plus type curriculum, you're going to find yourself talking about all kinds of different types of encryption types and, you know, authentication methodologies. I mean, how the heck are you do so many good examples here. I'm almost slightly overwhelmed. How do you do signed code without understanding the certificates, at least at a rudimentary level? Look,
I was going to say, but can't
you don't have to bring certificates all the way. Go ahead.
Listen, but can't you start with explaining at least at a 10,000-foot view what a certificate is, you know, what the point of cryptography is, and then later on get into the nuts and bolts of it? I mean, is that not an easier way to
In fact, when I teach cryptography in my book, I just use a simple XOR example.
Okay.
You know, like, so look, the whole idea here is to encrypt stuff, okay?
Yeah.
So how do we encrypt stuff? Well, you stir it up one way or another, you know? You stir it up, or you do shifting, or you know, do Caesar cipher, or, you know, whatever it might be. I don't care at this point. What I do care about, and this is important, I don't want to talk about cracking anything yet, all right? Not interested. What I'm interested in is understanding keys. And I think this is what gets people in a lot of trouble if you don't cover basics of cryptography early on, because people start seeing key, and especially you see these diagrams where they actually use a physical key as a diagram, and people are like, what is going on? This is binary data, ones and zeros. And then even worse, a lot of times they'll look at a key and they're thinking password. A lot of people can say key and they'll go, well, it's a password. It's like, well, not really. I mean, it could be derived from a password, but the reality is a key is a, you know, fixed length binary string. Because if you understand keys like that, it begins to allow you to understand lots of other stuff. Like, for example, all I like to do early on with cryptography is do a quick XOR cipher, which you can almost do in your head, okay?
Okay.
And so you do an XOR cipher and you have people encrypt and decrypt with it. Okay, great. Gee, Mike, this looks fairly easy to crack. I go, yeah, you know, anybody who's ever done an anagram crossword puzzle can crack this. But you want to see a more complex one? And what I actually did, Richard, years ago, and I still have it. In fact, I'll give it to you. I did a triple DES encryption graphically. It's a mess. It's a disaster. And I only go through one permutation of 47 permutations. It's been a while. And what it does is that people need black boxes in learning. This is not unique to IT security. In technical learning, you want to drill down to a point where people are like, beneath this, I don't care, okay? And everybody has that. And it's any form of technology, everybody's going to have a black box. So what
Okay.
I like to do is I take an encryption algorithm, whether it's something super trivial like XOR or a Vigenère cipher or whatever it might be, or AES. I don't care. It's a box, okay? And I plug some kind of binary key into it, and I turn on the crank, and encrypted data comes out in 64-bit chunks. That's as far as I go. The motivation for doing that is, number one, they understand keys, and then number two, and here's a big one, they start talking about inbound versus out of bound key transfer.
Okay.
And this is the first time people are going, wow, symmetric encryption is great for encryption, but moving that key around is a disaster. And then I'm like, wait till I show you something called RSA. And even with RSA, all I do is go into the idea of multiplying two large primes. That's it. Something really easy to do one way and darn near impossible to do the other way. That's all I do.
Okay.
And with that, I can generate the concept of two keys. So it's because they've already done keys, now they have two keys. And Richard, that's all I do. And I'll do a quick talk on digital signature versus certificate. I've got way towards the back of the course of full-blown X.509 certificate discussion. But I got to get them started a little bit. Because if I feel that if I don't do that, I wish I had my table of contents in front of me. Oh, actually, I do.
Well, I got to say this doesn't actually sound to me like we're as different as I thought we might be, because what I was thinking you were saying was that cryptography needed to be taught and understood in whole at a closer point to the beginning of learning your Security Plus. And I was just like, I've seen people's minds just go explode. And I think an easier way to do it, and it's the way that I think that we've been doing it for a little while, is to start them out, teach them the basics, kind of give them at least a little bit of an understanding, but then later on in the program, we go more in depth and we dig in and dive in more deeply. In other words, we talk about it briefly so they understand it and how it's used, talking about the single key versus two keys, asymmetric versus symmetric, just trying to really get them started without blowing their mind right off the bat, because we've seen them kind of freeze up and their minds just get blown if we do it too early.
Now, you can't go into a deep, like, for example, certificates, man, and PKI. That is some heavy lifting knowledge there.
Yeah.
My general rule for stuff like that is don't teach them stuff. The structure of trying to use the right words, my curriculum should be so intriguing that the learner almost starts saying, well, what are we going to do about that? And then all my job to do is go, here's something called certificates. Because certificates are used in so many places other than just the classic secure web page, right. By bringing it on early. The other thing that it supports me, for the record, is hashing, message digest, and stuff like that. And again, I'm not terribly interested in getting to a big conversation about, different. I do talk about the Security Plus talks about different hash types, and we definitely cover that a little bit. But
right,
all I do early on is get them to the idea of a hash, and then the 40 other places down the line in the instruction. Then I can drill down a little bit if I need to,
okay.
Talk about hash collisions with rainbow tables or, something like that. But at least they know what a hash is early enough on. Now, the other thing, keep in mind, I should have had this up in front of me. It's not.
Did you come unprepared to a sword fight, sir?
I did. It's true.
I don't know if we're, like I said, I don't know if we're as far apart as I thought we are.
I don't think we are either. I think what we needed to hear each other say is that a full-blown in-depth cryptography discussion early on can melt people. And
yeah,
I want to make sure people understand, why are we even sitting in a classroom? Why are you even working for $90,000 a year in a SOC? And that is security.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
Right. So, security is number one, is going to manifest as obscuring data in a way that the eyes that you don't want to see it can't see it. And number two, verifying the authenticity of the data so that you know that the data you're looking at is the data that was sent. I mean, that's 92% of what we do right there. I think.
And that's the reason for the keys.
Yeah. So
right there.
Yeah. So talk about keys. Talk about keys early on, and then if they, like if you want to go into big detail on AES, I can do it. I can do S cards. I can do the shift register. I can bore you, Richard Chapman, to death in a detailed discussion of AES, but just black box it. That's right. Put it in a black box, because unless I'm a coder who's actually trying to write my own AES encryption subroutines, nobody cares. It's a box. It comes in one way, it goes out the other way. That's it.
Okay. All right. Well, I thought we were going to be a little bit more at odds, but I actually think we're a little closer than I thought we were going to be. So that's not a bad thing.
So you guys are going to have to let me teach one of these.
Well, listen, I am absolutely on board with that. I think it would be great for you to come in and teach cryptography in our Security Plus portion of our program. I think it'd be great.
Sounds like a winner. Okay, well, Richard, as always, and this always happens, I find that 99% of the time, well-meaning techs are usually more on the same page than they think. And so it's always a pleasure. And you didn't try to technobabble me, which I greatly appreciate. And that's the other lesson for you young kids out there. What you just saw was an example of two techs who had a different opinion, who worked towards each other to get, well, I'm not saying we agree on every point. That would be unfair. But Richard, what we just did is a more and more rare thing these days, I think.
Agree. I completely agree. Well, listen, I think we've probably bored them enough today with encryption, but I think we should go deeper into cryptography. What do you think? You want to do another episode where you can kind of show a little bit more about cryptography?
You want to hear my first few minutes of getting somebody excited about cryptography?
Few minutes? Well, based on the time, I don't know. We could try.
No. Let's do another episode. And I'm going to give my little spiel, how I get people who are new at cryptography excited.
I love it. That sounds awesome. We should definitely do. All right. Well, thank you for being with us today. Those of you that obviously are wanting to learn cryptography, Security Plus, come and see us. Listen to Two Bald Nerds. We know what we're talking about. We'll talk to you later.
If you like Two Bald Nerds, check out our entire playlist right here. It's a lot of fun. We'll see you there.